is going to cover and demo how to apply spot colors utilizing channels in Photoshop. First, let's look back. If you recall from production class, we demoed and made use of monotones, duotones, and tritones by taking multi-colored images and utilizing the lab color channel, uh, highlighting the lightness channel, and then removing the other channels, and then changing to grayscale, and then from there applying and choosing the duotone mode to convert those images into a duotone or a tritone, and then the application of the spot colors. Um, Now we're going to talk about you know recoloring images or adding spot channels into a multicolor image for different utilization. So sometimes a client's going to ask you to have a gloss varnish, perhaps an embossing or a debossing, or knock something out for a special die cut. And utilization of a spot channel in Photoshop is a great way to isolate that and to ensure that we have accuracy. Also, if you're getting into the realm of apparel and you're trying to create screens or separate color images for to burn screens, you know sometimes there are specific inks, or the customer wants the apparel to utilize specific inks to represent the graphic that's going on the shirt or the hat or whatever the subject matter may be. So again, we can utilize the channel settings in Photoshop to apply spot colors to that, and it will preserve them, and it will make it easier for separation purposes, so that they can create the screens and apply it to whatever the subject matter might be. So um, a lot of times, people ask, how or why should I add spot channels to an image that's in RGB or perhaps lab. You typically don't do the color conversion to a process build like CMYK. It usually happens later in the workflow process, but you can add the spot color channels at any time, and whenever you do convert it to the process build, the file will maintain and preserve the spot colors. So let's take a look at our file. I have Speed Racer and his brother Rex Racer, or Racer X, from the original Speed Racer cartoon. We're going to examine the file real quick. Multi-channels. Look, we are in an RGB color profile, and it's a single layer. So the first thing I'm going to do is double click and unlock this. I'm going to rename it, and I'll just call it Racer X and Speed Racer, just to be specific. Okay. Now, the easiest way that you can isolate anything in Photoshop, obviously, is through the utilization of selections. Now, you can utilize any of the selection tools that are in Photoshop. Quick selection, we just did an exercise with the pen tool, and my personal belief is that's the most accurate method of creating a selection. But just due to the simplistic nature of this file, I'm going to make use of the magic wand tool. Probably the only time that I ever make use of the magic wand tool. And it's just due to the simplistic of the image, because there's overall consistent color application to a lot of the subject matter here. So I'm going to simply click on Racer X's yellow race car, and you'll notice right away that it only highlights portions that are enclosed or surrounded in that yellow. Anything that's surrounding it that's kind of cut off, like a wall, if you will, it's going to be stopped. So I have the marching ants selected on certain sections, but I want to make sure that I select everything that's in that yellow. So again, the easiest way to tackle this is by going up to Select and coming down to Select Similar, and it will select all of the colors that match some of that pixel data. You may have to adjust your tolerance level, so just be mindful of that. And then once the selection is created, I've personally found that from time to time, just to ensure accuracy, you may have to go up under select and come down to modify and click on expand. And it's just beneficial to expand the selection by 1 to perhaps 2 pixels. So this ensures that we are creating a clean selection, right? So again, the selection tools, there's a lot of other additional features that we can utilize in the process as well, and that's kind of governed by your personal workflow process. Now from here, so we're going to recolor Racer X's car. I'm going to go into the channels panel, which is typically nested in with the layers and paths panel. And because the image is in RGB, you can see the RGB panel and then the red, green, blue, right? So I'm going to create a new spot channel, and I'm going to get this dialog box. Now, a few things I want you to be mindful of is the naming. So when I click on the little thumbnail here, it pulls up color libraries. If you're seeing the picker, you want to make sure that it says color libraries, and you want to make sure that we're working from the color book of either solid coded or solid uncoded. Either one will work. I just suggest remaining consistent throughout the document. So we'll stick with solid coded, and this is a yellow car. And if we're going to try to recolor a spot color that's something similar, I can choose Pantone yellow or 012. They're relatively close. I'll choose Pantone yellow. I will click OK. Do not change the name. And then the solidity is just what we see on screen. Okay, so I can change that to 50% or 25%, whatever I want. It's only going to represent what I see on screen. All right, it has no effect or doesn't determine the amount of ink that is printed onto a piece after separations have been created. So the solidity, again, is just for visual purposes only. So for this, I'll just leave it set to 50, and then I'm going to click OK. All right. Now immediately you see a new channel appear in the channels palette that says Pantone Yellow C. All right. So let's move forward into let's work on the M on the Mach 5. So I'm going to select this M, and when you are creating another selection, you want to make sure that you're not on the channel that you just created. Make sure you're on the RGB, the primary channel, and I'll click M. And then the same thing, I'm going to go up to select and come down to similar. So I select all this red. And then one more time, I'm going to go up under select, come down to modify, expand. I'll expand it by 1 pixel. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a new spot channel. And obviously we don't want this to be yellow. And this is a good time to point out the fact that since it's maintained the preferences from the previous selection in the yellow and the solidity set to 50, you can kind of see how it puts an overlay of 50% of that yellow over top of the red. If I were to put in 100, it would make everything appear as if it were 100% yellow. All right? So I'm going to click on color, and I'm just going to use 032 red. We'll click OK. And then for this one, I will change the solidity down to 50%. And we'll click OK. All right. Now from here, what I want to show you is that I can turn off these other channels, and you can see how with the 2 spot channels that I've created, what we're visually able to see. So again, if we were to send this to a printer or an apparel company to have something produced, they'll be able to run this through their workflow process and output these 2 particular spot colors that we've created into plates without any type of problem. So We can keep these intact if we want to, the original channels, or if for some reason the company prefers that these not remain, you can select the RGB or individual channels and then simply delete them. And it's going to ask you, do you want to delete those channels? You say yes, and then the only thing that's going to be remaining are the spot channels that we have created that are custom. Now, once you have the file completed appropriately, it's best to make sure that you save it out into a format that is, something that's appropriate for the output process. So we want to make sure that we're saving this as a PSD file. Some companies prefer it to be saved out as a Photoshop DCS, and DCS just stands for Desktop Color Separation. It was developed by a company called Quark, but it was developed for the sole purpose to be for files like this to be utilized in programs like Quark Express, PageMaker, or InDesign, so that you could properly create separations if it were brought into those programs. There's two different formats. There's a DCS 1.0 and a DCS 2.0. Really, the only differences are that the 2.0 supports grayscale images with the addition of extra spot channels as well, whereas the 1.0 doesn't. So from here, if you wanted to save this out as a PSD file, I would do a file, save as, and I will just rename this spot and save the copy. Oops. And then if you wanted to save this as a DCS file, you would have to do to File, Save a Copy. That's going to give us more options. And I want to click on the drop down, Photoshop DCS2. And down below, hit Save. I get additional dialog box for the preview settings, 8-bit. We'll change the encoding from ASCII to binary. Click OK, and it would save that as the DCS2 file format. So that's it for this screencast on creating spot colors or adding spot colors to a raster image in Photoshop with the utilization of spot channels.